Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here. I was a bit gutted this morning when Archbishop Fisichella, who I believe is an Italian, spoke with immaculate English. And I was thinking, oh no, because I thought, he was going to had bad Italian, bad English, and you're not then going to understand him, which would have made trying to understand my Scottish accent a bit easier. I shall try and speak my best English. We do actually speak English, but sometimes we lapse into Scottish. So I've got a team of Scots in the front here who are going to put me right if I get it wrong, interpret for you. The best way to try and work through a Glasgow accent is just imagine I'm about to beat you up or steal your car. Because that's how we always seem to be the baddies on television. Any show, any murder mystery, the baddie is always a Scot. And the sad and tragic thing is we take delight in that. We all go, oh yeah, that's us, as hard as nails. But actually we're not really. So I am delighted to be here. And delighted to speak on which is probably, it's gone now, but possibly the longest title I've ever been given for a talk. Look towards God. Okay, that's a talk in itself. Christ, there's another wee talk. His church, there's a huge big talk. And then the sacraments. And then as if that's not enough. And developing a plan for life. So I'm going to do the best I can. Last night, Curtis spoke brilliantly about looking at ourselves, about being honest about the position that we are in, and about how we can and should turn away from sin and become real men and women of virtue. And that is something that we all need to do. That is the call that we all have. But we all know how incredibly difficult that can be. And as St. Paul famously, and I think fantastically, reminds us, when he says, the good things I want to do, I never seem to do, and the bad things I desperately don't want to do, well, bring them on, because they are easy. At least that is how it is for me, and I'm sure that is how it is for most of us. They always seem to be easier to do. But as we know, and as we've heard, and as we continually hear through this weekend, we know that deep down these things will not make us happy. They will not bring us true happiness, and we will not find fulfilment. No amount of material or sensual pleasure will make us truly happy. We are made for higher things. I'm constantly amazed at how people can get so worked up about things, things that do bring happiness, and they do bring a level of happiness, but the passion with which they speak about it is phenomenal. And I'm the same. I could rant on my country, and probably one day will, about certain things, get me onto football. Not that Scotland's a great football team, but we're passionate, we love it. We love losing, actually, because that's what we do best. It's a victory that we're just there. We just celebrate getting anywhere. This year, a bit tragic about the tennis as well, but you could rant on about all of these things. And it's amazing how passionate people will get about things, about their holidays away, or about their houses and furniture, and that's all fine. All of that is fine. But a couch is never going to make you happy. It might make you happy for a few hours as you slog on it, but it's not going to bring you eternal happiness. It's not going to wake you. Nobody, at least I hope nobody, wakes up in the morning and goes, oh, the couch, I've got my couch, I can't wait to get on it. All the other things in life that people seek for don't really make us happy, and we kind of know that. The world tells us pleasure will make us happy, but pleasure is a fleeting thing. As you know, we work in a crisis pregnancy centre, and we give a lot of talks on what I would call the Catholic vision of love and sex, which is, of course, one of the big pleasures that people seek in our world. And I'm constantly saying to the young people, no amount of sex will make you happy. If sex made you happy, we should be living in Shangri-La, because it's everywhere. If sex was what made our young people happy, and our old people as well, then we should be happier than we've ever been. And yet, as we know, we exist because sex has gone usually quite horribly wrong. Because that's not what makes you happy. No amount of sex will make you happy, because sex and love are two different things. It's easy to have sex. It's not as easy to be loved and to find love in a fulfilling way that will really make you happy. And so at the heart of that pleasure-driven thing, there is a real lie. And that comes from Satan, who, as we know, is the father of lies. And so he tells us that the pursuit of wealth will make you happy. The pursuit of things will make you happy. But you can have as much wealth. At the end of the day, there are no pockets in a shroud. When you die, you go with the same bank balance as I've currently got, which is about £42. That's it. We go with nothing. We enter this world with nothing, and that we leave with nothing. These things will not make us happy. Possessions and wealth do not equal peace. They might make you more comfortable in your misery, but they're not going to make you happy. The same with things like our world is obsessed with being thinner, being faster, being cleverer. And none of that makes you whole or makes you happy. At the end of the day, there's only one thing that makes us happy, really happy, and that is our relationships. It's how we are loved and who we are loved by that makes us happy. And the most important, the fundamental relationship of all the relationships that we ever have in our life, the fundamental, the most important relationship is with the God who created us, who literally is our Father in heaven. And if that relationship is not right, then nothing will be right. Nothing will come right. And the reason for that, as Father was saying there, because we are, our sister, can't remember who, one of them, was saying that we are created in the image and likeness of God. I was delighted when that video first went up and the first picture you saw was of the child in the womb. Because that is where we began our life's journey with God, not even at the moment of our conception, but even before then. God does not make mistakes. And God, you are here today because God has willed that you will be here. It's through the will of God. Your parents played their part, but let's not dwell on that. But they did play their part, hopefully in cooperation with God. And because of that, you are here. From all eternity and for all eternity. It's incredible. God created you. He had you in mind from all eternity and for all eternity. I think that's just awesome. It really is mind-blowing. And He created you because He wants to be here and in a deep and meaningful relationship with you. He wants you to know Him person to person, face to face. I have oft-quoted and often do quote, because I love it, the old catechism. This is where you check out who all the old dears are in the hall. The old catechism used to say, and the new one still does, but in my day you used to learn it off by heart, the old catechism. I really am that old. And the old catechism used to say, the first question was, who made me?
God made me.
Right. And why did God make you? Oh, fantastic. That is just brilliant. For those of you up the back who couldn't quite hear it, God made you. So who made you? God made me. And why did God make you? Why did He go to the bother? Why did God make you? He made you to know, love and serve Him in this life and be forever happy with Him in the next. From all eternity and for all eternity, God, who made everything, made you and made me. And that was no small thing. Certainly in my case, it was no small thing. And He made us as children. He made us as children to Him as our Father. That loving relationship of love. So when your pals, or people you hardly know, as happens to me sometimes, people will say to you kind of cynically, this was obviously before I was a sister, now it's fairly obvious I'm a Catholic or a goth gone really badly wrong. But you know when people used to kind of say to you when you were in the pub in my younger days and people would say, oh that's right, you're one of the Catholics. And I would remove my second hat, which they obviously thought I had on. And I would say, yeah, I am. Actually, by the way, I am one of those Catholics. And then I would sort of say to them, and I tell you what, I love being a Catholic. It is part of me. It is in my DNA. It's in everything I do or say or want to be, and it brings me more joy than you can imagine. So, mate, what do you say to that? Do you want to get some? Do you want to become one? It's easy, no bother. But people always say it as if, again, it's one of my pet hates, as if you haven't thought about it, that somehow you're Catholic because you had no better club to join. And you say, oh no, I had plenty of other opportunities to join other clubs. This is not a club. And if it is, it's the best one in the world, let me tell you, and one of the biggest. Because we try to make it as if it's irrelevant. What used to really drive me mad, and some of you will have heard me say this before, but when people would say to you, oh, well, I used to be a Catholic. I'm like, oh, right, really? Probably still are if you're baptised. In fact, you definitely still are. I used to be a Catholic, then I thought about it and I gave up. And I'm like, well, I was a Catholic, brought up a Catholic. I thought about it and I decided to become a religious sister. So how come my thinking's wrong and your thinking's right? Actually, I think it's your thinking that's wrong. As if somehow we have just lapsed into Catholicism instead of lapsing out of it. But as you know, that's not the way it goes in this day and age. To be someone who stands up for your faith, you really do need to know your faith and you need to love your faith. Because you will get opposition. You will get an incredible lack of understanding, even more than opposition. There's very few people who oppose us, but there's a lot of people who willfully will not understand or don't want to understand the church. And so they just look at all the negative things of it. But I think, if we show the reasons why we can and should acknowledge our faith, and I think we should acknowledge, we should defend, and we should love not just our faith, but the church. Because the church is like us. The church was willed by God from all eternity. The church is not an afterthought. Again, sometimes people will say that to you, oh, the church was just invented by a group of men. You're like, oh, get a grip. As if something's going to last 2,000 years because somebody, a committee sat round and thought, hey, what about creating a church? If you've ever been on any of the kind of committees I've been on, they wouldn't last a fortnight, far less, 2,000 years. The church is not an afterthought. The church is an integral part of the plan of God. And like us, when God made the church, when God founded the church, God does not make mistakes, It's as if God was up there and suddenly he realised, oh no, that's right, Jesus is coming back. Right lads, a plan, Anybody got a plan what we do now? Why don't we start a club? We'll call it a church, but we'll start a club. As if God knew. This is part of the plan of God from all eternity, that he would found this church. And to found the church, he sent his son, and he sent his son as one of us, which again I just find awesome. I just find it an incredible thing that Jesus Christ walked this earth. I've never been to the Holy Land, but lots of people who have been say there is something quite incredible there. For all the trauma that's going on in the Holy Land, for all the lack of peace, people say it is incredible to walk where Christ walked. It is incredible to really know and believe that for 33 years, from his conception in his mother's womb until he died on that cross for us and then came back, Christ walked on this earth the same way that you and I walk on this earth. That is an amazing thing. True God and true man. And do we honestly think that nobody had thought of that? Do we honestly think that the mind of God did not have a plan for the future? It was going to be 33 years and then panic. I don't think so. And the plan that God had was for the church. And so Jesus Christ, while he walked this earth, he never wrote a book. He never wrote a single word as far as we know, except for the one in the sand, which we don't know what it was, but somebody always says, he wrote the word in the sand, so I'm just getting that one out the road. I know he wrote one word or a sentence, but we don't know what it is. But he never wrote a book. He didn't leave a pastoral plan. He founded a church. And that's why it's so important that we know and that we love the church. Because it is part, like us, it's part of the plan of God. And so he founded the church. And again, an amazing thing I think about the church is that this is the church which called the apostles forward to be the founding fathers of the church which formed the early disciples, the church which came from the early persecution, is the same church that called you and me here today. It's the same Roman Catholic Church, founded by Peter, founded by Christ, and left in the capable hands of Peter. And from that day to this day, 2,000 years on, the church is still here, is still carrying out its mission, and is in no way irrelevant. I always think it's one of the things that really points to the fact that the church is founded by God, because there's no way it would have survived 2,000 years. I'm not slagging off the men who've been in charge of it since then, but you know, you have to admit we've had some howlers. We've done some amazingly difficult things, you know. The church is not perfect, but the church is called to be perfect. And the church in its teaching is perfect. The church will never teach us in error. The church is our mother, and the church loves us, and we must love the church in turn. So when people tell you that the church is irrelevant, that it's old-fashioned, that it has no place in the modern society, you can tell them different. And the great thing is, the story doesn't stop there, because the church is not made up of buildings, beautiful though some of those buildings may be, as indeed is this place that we are in today. The church is not made up of buildings, it's made up of people. We are the church. We are the people called now, as the early apostles were called, to form the church. We are the new disciples for this new millennium. We weren't around when Jesus walked on the earth, but Jesus is around here for us as we walk in the earth. He's about, 500 yards down the road there in the tabernacle, as he is in the tabernacle of every single church in every single place in the world where there is a Catholic church. It's a phenomenal thought. It's a phenomenal thought that Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul and divinity, through the sacraments of the church, is present for us 2,000 years later. And so that's what we are called to be. We are called to be followers of Christ, to draw ourselves ever closer to him. That's what it means to be Christian. And Curtis spoke a bit last night about the apostles, particularly about Peter. I have always loved the apostle Peter, because I think he is, again, this is a brilliant Scottish expression, but you'll probably know what it means, a complete numpty. I mean, the man was an idiot, really. I find Peter fantastic, you know. Peter is like so many of us, you know, Lord, Lord, I want to serve you, Lord, Lord, you know, I want to do, forget these others, they're all weaklings, they're all wimps. Me, Lord, I'll serve you. And what do we hear? Cock-a-doodle-doo. I don't think so, Peter. You know, I love St. Peter because he just reminds me of so many of us. He reminds me of me. You know, it's great. You can stand up here, you can whatever, and then you get back on, you know, we get back in, we get to a service station, I say to Sister Andrea, right, I'm covering up. I don't want anybody to talk to me about Christ. I'm fed up, I've done enough today. And then suddenly I hear, cock-a-doodle-doo, and I think, okay, that's it, we're back in business. You know, and that's what I love about all the apostles, you know. They were all really a raggle-taggle bunch, you know. My other favourites are James and John, the sons of thunder. Is that right? James and John, sons of thunder, you know, who send their mother to say, see when you make it big, Lord, going to put these... I mean, how embarrassing is that? That's a no-no, man up and go yourself. You know, but to send your mother, you know, it's fantastic. And then we've got Thomas, whose feast we've just celebrated, who's like, aye, right, prove it. You know, Thomas, fantastic. But the good thing about all of the apostles, and the good thing about all of us being given that example of the apostles, is that we really can turn our lives around. You know, Peter, he takes a bit longer, I think, because, you know, Peter, The best story I love about Peter is Peter, when he has seen the Lord, he has seen the risen Lord, he's been there, and then he heads for Rome and he settles in Rome, which is what makes us Roman Catholics. Had he made his way to Birmingham, we'd be Birmingham Catholics. There's a thought. Made his way to Cornwall, we'd be Cornwall Catholics, but we're not, we're Roman Catholics. And the reason we are Roman Catholics is because that's where Peter went. And Peter founded the church there in Rome. And so things start to get a bit, heating up in Rome. And so what does the great Peter do? What does the great Lord, I love you more than all of these, Lord, whatever. Peter is sneaking out the city, running like blazes when he meets Christ, who says, where are you going? Or words to that effect. And it's incredible. After all of that, that gives me great consolation, I think. Because I think Peter, he saw it all, he was there, he witnessed it all, and still he was running. But more importantly, in that encounter, which I think was Peter's 4 p.m, Peter said, you're right, I'm going back, do what you want. And of course, as we know, he died for the Lord. And that's the amazing thing about the apostles. So, Christ left us the church, and he left us the sacraments. And I just very briefly want to go through the sacraments, just very briefly to point out how we need to embrace them. Again, you would think that the sacraments were something people thought, right, what do we do next? Any ideas, plans, anyone? Any ideas? The sacraments were part of the plan of God as well. And one of the first sacrament after baptism is what gives us our life in Christ. Baptism is when original sin is taken away and we become a child of God and a part of the church. And I think probably inspired by the apostles and Christ knowing what we were like, the next sacrament we get is the sacrament of reconciliation, of confession. Because how many times do we, like Peter, have to turn back and say, I'm sorry, Lord? Do we, like James and John, have to go, it was a bit of a mistake sending the mother, we didn't actually mean that, bit of a fault there. How many times do we have to turn back? And yet we have a sacrament there made for us, created for us, because God knows us. The true God, the true man, knows what we are like. And it's difficult to go to confession. It's difficult. It's a hard thing to do. And yet it's the most wondrous pleasure in the world. When the priest says, I absolve you of your sins. Go and sin no more and be at peace. And you bounce out of that confessional like Tigger. At least that's what I do, because I'm always like, yes. Because I always find I go in a bit like Eeyore. And I bounce out like Tigger. That's to me what confession is. So he gives us the sacrament of confession because he knows us and he loves us. And he wants us to know and to love and to serve him and to be happy with him in the next life. So he gives us opportunities time and time and time again. The next sacrament is when we receive Christ for the first time in Holy Communion. And again, it's one of these things that we forget. We forget because we're so used to it. We're so used to, please God anyway, we're so used to going to receive Christ in Holy Communion that we forget that's what we're doing. Christ comes into us. God made man comes into us and lives in us and gives us the food for the journey that we need. And it's an amazing thing, so when people say to me things like, oh, Mass is so boring, I go, actually, you're so boring. How can Mass be boring? Jesus Christ, in the presence of all the angels and the saints, comes down into this scabby little church in this hideously cold parish, because the parish priest is lost where the heating switch is. Is that just my parish priest? I think it is. But he comes, it doesn't matter. He comes to us in all our weakness, in all our poverty, and he comes to us. The priest makes present the real presence of Christ. How can that be boring? And can I just say that most of the people say that to me are people who are 24/7 playing Candy Crush on their phones. I mean, get a life. 2 seconds of Candy Crush isn't worth, the worst homily, the frozen church, whatever, the most boring Mass, the worst hymns. Not worth anything, So the next time somebody says to you, first of all, the next time somebody says to you, Mass is boring, go, really? Really boring? Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul and divinity, right there for you? I think you need to get a grip. Especially if it's somebody that's a train spotter or something, you know. I love Star Wars, but I think Mass is boring. You need to get a grip. You know, if only the priest could be like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay, Jabba, shut it and move on. Anyway, that is just one of these things. And what we need to do, so that's the bit about why did God make us? He made us to know Him. So you need to be prepared to answer these questions. You know, so when people say, well, I don't go to Mass anymore because it's boring, you need to say, well, actually, it's not boring. If you understood a fraction of what you receive at Mass, you would be back there. And I tell you what, I'll be at your door at 9:30 on Sunday morning. You're coming to 10 o'clock Mass with me. Because I am convinced that a lot of people lapse from the practice of their faith because we let them. Because we don't go, actually, you have not lapsed for some deep theological reasons. You have lapsed because you were out in the lash on Saturday night and can't be bothered getting up on Sunday morning. So I'm coming for you on Sunday morning and I'm taking you to Mass. And then you tell me if that's boring. You want to be a good friend, you do that to one of your friends. And you'd be amazed, actually. Sometimes just the passion that you have, even if you can't answer all the theological discourse, not that you generally have to in the pub on a Saturday night. You know, deep theology and Guinness don't generally go together. But your passion for the sacrament, your passion for going to Mass will bring people back. And keep challenging. Don't accept what they say. You know, keep challenging. And if you don't know the answers, find out the answers. There are plenty of priests, religious, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church will give you the answer for everything you need. Ignorance is no excuse to lose an opportunity to save a soul. The next sacrament that we receive is confirmation. And confirmation is something that comes to give us strength, to give us power. And yet sometimes we're a wee bit pathetic, we have to admit. We're a wee bit, you know, oh well, I know I'd like to go along and I know they've organised this and the parish put a lot of work into it, but, you know, Big Brother's back on. Really? Big Brother is back on and you'd rather watch Big Brother than go out to something? Than go out to something the parish has organised? You know, than to spend an hour with God in exposition, than to go and say the rosary in the month of May. Just do it. Just get up and go and do it and stop making excuses. And that's what confirmation does for us. And again, I think, especially those of us who have been born and brought up Catholics, we kind of, you know, we do lapse a bit into familiarity. You know, when was the last time you prayed to your confirmation saint? When was the last time you even thought about your confirmation saint? You know, I think it's something that we don't do very often. And yet, when we made our confirmation, we were given that saint's help. And so maybe just in a little way, if we want to kind of, you know, do something, maybe we could just revive our confirmation saint. Give them a wee check-in. You know, get your, well, you can't do it in Facebook, check-in, St. Bridget. I am here, where are you? I've been waiting. I've been here all the time. I'm not the one that lost contact, dear. So, you know, maybe it would be easier if our saints had Facebook pages. We could, whatever you do with Facebook, we could tweet them all the time. Yeah. Now, the next sacraments are the sacraments of marriage, holy orders, and extreme unction, or the sacrament of the sick and the dying. And I just want to dwell a little bit on marriage, because the likelihood is that most people here will at some point get married. That is what most people do. Most of the people who fill up our churches are married families, married couples. But in this day and age, and for you young people here, it is an incredibly difficult thing to find the right person. It's incredibly difficult to find someone who shares your Catholic faith, who believes as you believe. And the first thing you need to know about your Catholic faith and know about what the Church teaches on marriage, because again, really in our work we see it all the time, the breakdown of family life is what's really destroying our society, I think. It's the breakdown of all of the senses of married life. So it's the breakdown of commitment. It's the breakdown of openness to new life and respect for new life. It's the breakdown of the ability to stay as family. And I know that many of us, and myself and my family, I have people who have lapsed away from the church. I have people who are living together outside marriage. I have people who are divorced. We are living in a really difficult time. I know that. But difficult times calls on heroes and calls on saints. And one of the ways that we really, really need to be heroic in this day and age is to stand up for the church's teachings on sex and on marriage, on love and on marriage, because that is where where the devil is really attacking. I have spoken for many years on this subject and many years on the church and all sorts of things, and I used to quite often, through the pro-life work, I used to quite often speak to people like politicians and local authority people and stuff like this. I have never in my life met a politician who was for hunger, or for injustice, or for racism, or for inequality. But I have met many politicians, good Catholics among them, who are for abortion, who are for euthanasia. I really do. I mean, it's my issue, I'll grant you that. But I really do think that this is where the devil is striking. The breakdown in marriage and family life is frightening, and the consequences are frightening. The statistics for sexually transmitted disease, the statistics for abortion, the statistics for euthanasia, everything that is anti-life is growing and growing and growing. And we have kind of taken our eye off the ball. We have kind of let things slip. I hear it said to me all the time, when people will say things like, this brilliant expression where people go, "But sister, what can you do?" And I go, well, let me give you some advice. Just try defending the church's teaching. So, the next time one of your friends says, "Oh, I'm thinking of asking the girlfriend to move in with me," you just say, "Well, don't. That's a stupid idea. What are you thinking of that for?" "Oh, because we've been out together for 3 weeks now." No, that's a slight exaggeration. I mean, we've been out together for a year now, and I just think, it would be good. Well, it wouldn't be good. It would be terrible. Do you love her? Yeah. Well, marry her. "Oh, I don't love her that much." Exactly. That's my point, caller. So why, if you don't love her enough to marry her, do you want her to live in with you, to move in with you? Don't have sex before marriage. Save that for the person that you want to be with for the rest of your life. And the same with the use of contraception. People will say to me, "Sister, why do you think we have so few vacations? Why do you think?" And one of the reasons I think is because of contraception. When you have good Catholic couples who have been contracepting all their marriage life, sometimes in ignorance, sometimes willfully, often just because they're confused, and they then have the standard 2.4 children, or I think even that's less now, because 1.8 children, the average that a family has now, they are not going to be open to giving that child to God as a priest or as a religious sister. When you have put a lie at the heart of your marriage, when you have disobeyed the church and what the church asks of you, then that causes real problems. That is going to be a real issue for you. And I do think that's one of the huge reasons why we don't have as many vacations. First of all, we don't have as many Catholics. It's funny, I'm slightly obsessed with this because I am the fourth child. And so when people say to me, "Oh, that's our second, that's enough," and I go, "All right. Well, I wouldn't have been here if my mother had had that attitude. I'm glad my mother didn't have that attitude. I'm glad my mother had an openness to human life because I'm the fourth. I don't worry so much about brother number 3. But, I'm the fourth and I am glad I am here." But it's also just about a generosity that we have to be open to Christ. And it is a real issue. And one of the lovely things that we find in our work so often is when you speak to people about what the church asks of them, and it is difficult. I know it's difficult. I know you're under incredible pressure to have sex. I know you're under incredible pressure to live with people before you get married. I know that we all come from difficult circumstances, but I also know that the truth sets you free. And the truth is, if Jesus Christ, if God is number one in your life and is number one in your married life, when you commit yourself to each other through God, and when He is at the heart of your marriage, that's a marriage that's going to last, and that's a marriage that's going to give life and love to the world. So really think about it. If you don't know what the church's teaching is on these things, then find out. Come and ask me. I'll be happy to tell you later. It's not difficult to know what the church asks of us. It is difficult to live it. But like anything, the fact that it's difficult does not make it impossible. You know, again, one of the things I'm always saying is people talk to you as if not having sex, which of course they're vaguely obsessed with when you're a religious. And when we have school kids in, we always have a question time thing, and there's always lots of questions about your sex life, which you think is a bit useless because I don't have one. But, you know, I always say to the kids, nowhere, not one single place, anywhere throughout the world, is there a death certificate which says, cause of death, lack of sex. Lack of sex will not actually kill you. It is not a fatal condition. Lack of love, now that's a different thing. Lack of love ruins more people's lives than I would care to think about. So many of you will be asked by God to take this challenge to live married life. It's a challenge, but it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The church's teaching on marriage is fantastic. If you don't know it, do not leave this tent without finding out. Because again, ignorance will not save you, and knowledge will bring you great joy and happiness. Final two sacraments, and then I'm just going to finish. Very briefly, holy orders. If you are called, if you feel the slightest scintilla that you are called to follow God, then what are you waiting for? Do you think you're going to get a better job choice? Do you think anybody is going to offer you a better life than to be the man who can bring Jesus Christ's body, blood, soul and divinity into a world that is desperate for Him? It is desperate. Our countries, our world, we're desperate for Christ. You know, they won't let me read a newspaper in the office because I'm a bit of a ranter. And the answer is always Jesus Christ, you know. So when they're saying, how could this happen? And so, Jesus Christ, because we don't have Jesus Christ in our lives. That's why it happens. And because we, as disciples of Christ, stay silent. We stay silent and quiet when we should be shouting from the rooftops, not against anybody, but for someone. We should be shouting from the rooftops in any way that we can. Jesus Christ is not our way, our truth, or our life. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And if the way that Christ is calling you to priesthood, get on with it. Talk to someone. It will not go away. I think if I asked all those who have answered the call of their vocation, all the priests and religious, if they'd like to put their hands up, if they came to making this decision simply because the Lord will not go away. Absolutely. Simply because He continually calls you. I thought when Cardinal Winning asked me to run his pro-life initiative, I thought I had hit dream ticket. This is it, ideal job, pro-life and Catholic. Here we are, I'm sorted. And I could not believe, because I thought I was working very hard, and when it first started it was chaotic, and because the Cardinal just made an announcement and said, anybody thinking of having an abortion, don't do it, come to us and we will help you. And then he phoned me. He's a cardinal, he gets off with it. But anyway, then he phoned me and said, I thought you could just run it for me. And I was thinking, and I said, boss, I think you've just lost the plot. Have you any idea what you've just done? And so I thought my life was sorted. I thought, that's it. I don't have to think about this religious life thing ever again. Here I am, and I can keep myself available for George Clooney, should he be in town. You never know. You just never know. And after about a year of running the initiative, the voice would not go away. And it's amazing. One of our friends who works in a Catholic bookshop used to come up all the time to the office, mainly because our coffee was free. And he used to come up to the office, and he'd come up and he'd say, I've heard about these nuns in America called the Sisters of Life. And I was like, well done, it's good you can read. Congratulations. And I put the magazine he gave me in the bottom drawer. And then a couple of weeks later he comes up and goes, there's this other group of nuns in America called the Servants of the Gospel of Life. And I was like, Thomas, I think you should join them. You're more interested than me. However, probably would have made a great nun, who knows. Anyway, but eventually I thought, I just have to get this out of my system. How many of you thought that? You know, I'll just get it out of my system. I'll go for a wee week. I'll see what they're like. I'll have a holiday. It's in New York. How glamorous is that when you're to Glasgow? That's quite glamorous. And I went to Cardinal Winning and I said, right, boss, I need to talk to you. And I started and I said, I just need to say to you that I think God is calling me, perhaps, maybe, possibly, to religious life. And there's these sisters in America I want to see. And his first reaction was, America? You get a nosebleed going to Edinburgh. Because I am a terrible home person. Honestly, if I didn't have to leave the south side of Glasgow, I never would. I'm a nightmare. And I said, I know, but I can hardly say, Lord, I want to serve you with all my being, but only if it's within 10 miles of where I currently live. Thanks very much. That's not going to happen. However, it did actually. And I went to New York and I saw the Sisters of Life, and they are fantastic. They are phenomenal. And just before I had left, Cardinal Winning, who some of you may have known, he was a phenomenal man. He was, how can I put it, he was a character. And Cardinal Winning, as I was leaving to go, said, see, just before you go, remember, we could do with some new, young religious life in Scotland. And I was like, all right. Thinking, well, that'll never happen. I was young then, mind you. And so I went to America, I saw the sisters, I was with the sisters for approximately 2.5 minutes, and I thought, this is not for me. And so I read the Gospel of Life. I was there for 3 weeks, and I thought I might as well make good use of it. And I read the Gospel of Life, which was a letter published in 1995 from the great, now, Saint John Paul II. And this blew my mind away. Again, people always say to me, no, Vatican documents are too difficult. They're not. Just read them. Just read the words. Do it in small paragraphs if you're having difficulty. Just, people say, I mean, Evangelium Vitae, it's very difficult. Have you ever read it? Have you ever tried it? It's not. It's just words. Just read it. And then tell me it's difficult. But actually it's not. And I read it and I was so inspired. I came back home and I cannot tell you how odd it felt to be sitting there with the Cardinal. He said, how'd you get on? I said, it was great, thanks, New York's fab. Did a bit of shopping, St. Patrick's Cathedral, it's wonderful. No. He says, right, what happened? And I said, well, I think God is calling me and you to found a new religious community in Glasgow called the Sisters of the Gospel of Life. And I cannot begin to tell you, when he said, so do I was like, no, I don't think you heard me. No, surely I have to go away and think about it for 10 years. And he said, just do it. And that's what I want to leave you with the just do it. Just get on with it. Because the last sacrament we have to talk to is the one that is coming to us all. The sacrament of the sick and the dying. One day you and I shall face the Lord. One day we shall die. Now, being a Scot of Irish extraction, I talk about death all the time. Sister Andrea is even more obsessed about death than I am. She's famous for it. I talk about death all the time. I actually quite like death. We were at a funeral the other day, and we came back from the funeral, and Gail, the girl who works in our office, is not even baptised. She's nothing. And we were raving about this funeral. We got, it was fantastic. It's a funeral of a young friend of ours, mum, who died at the age of 54 after battling cancer for 6 years. It was tragic in the extreme and it was sad, but she was a woman of great faith. Her daughter, our friend Katie, read the for reading, which I don't think I could do. I'm filling up just thinking about it. But it was a fantastic, faith-filled way for this woman to mark the next stage of her life, because for those who believe, life has not ended but just changed. And for us, one day our life will end, and that will be some change. Because when our life on this earth ends, we face God. We stand there, and the Lord will say to me, so, and to you, the Lord will say to you, so, who did you think was speaking to you all those years? Who did you think got you to invocation year after year after year? Who do you think sent those sisters into your parish? Who do you think has been asking you to answer the call all the days of your life? And that to me would be tragic, to stand before God and say, I didn't know it was you. I didn't know what you were asking me to do. If you don't know, find out, and find out fast. When I was looking at the programme, and there's a thing that says, where do you want me to go, Lord? And that is the question that we're all asking. What do you want of me? Where do you want me to go? I would like to add another question, which is, when would you like me to go, Lord? Now? Now? You know, when the Lord calls people in the scriptures, they leave everything and go there and then and follow the Lord. So if you're at your, how long's invocation been going on? If you're at your 4th, 5th year of invocation and you haven't made up your mind, stop coming and get on with it. Make up your mind. Life is short and hell is real. It's a fact. Can I just end by saying, I look out here, see you're looking at me, which is unfortunate for you. There's not much I can do about that, but I'm looking out at you. And if the world could see your faces, if the world could see how much Jesus means to you, if the world could see how much you love the church, the world would be changed. We were talking in the car down, it's quite a long journey coming down yesterday, and Sister Andrea at one point put on an 80s revival album or something. Honestly, I lasted about 10 minutes and I was like, right, enough. So we started to get into a conversation, and one of the conversations that we got into was about just how people find it very difficult to make a commitment. They find it very difficult. You know, so we're all praising Jesus and we're all saying, praise be Jesus here, whatever. You know, we're all saying that, we're all whatever. But actually, the time for you to follow Christ is today. The time for you to give your life to Christ is today. We are in urgent need of people to be disciples, of people to follow Christ. So where do you want me to go, Lord? Where am I to go? You have to take the next step. You have to move on. Life really is short. You ask anybody here who's getting older, it gets faster as you get older. It's a fact. It gets faster as you get older. Life really is short. And not only is hell real, but more importantly, heaven is real. So the next time I see you lot, I want to see you in heaven. And I want to see you having made the choices that send you there. So thank you for listening, and please get on with it.